And our special guest this week, we've been discussing immigration. We've been discussing over the last few shows, we've talked about the plight of the white South African farmers. Someone who's been fighting for their cause, amongst many other causes, is Avi Yemini from Melbourne. Avi, welcome to Outsiders. Glad to have you here. Now, just tell us, I mentioned earlier, you have come from a family of 17. You were born in Melbourne the night you arrived in Melbourne, one of 17 kids. Talk us through your background quickly before we get into white South African farmers and other things.
So I grew up, from an ultra-Orthodox Jewish family. I'm the middle child of 17 kids. I like to think I have middle child syndrome times 17. Joined the army, the IDF, at about 19.
The Israel Defence Force.
And here I am today.
Yep.
That's right.
So you were in the Israel Defence Force, and you actually, tell us what you did there.
I was a sharpshooter, spent most of my active duty on the Gaza border.
Fantastic. Well, we're going to come back to the Gaza. You've become quite prominent recently in political activism, if you like. You own a gym, or owned a gym in Melbourne. Now, tell us about... we're going to play quickly a clip of you talking to people about white South African farmers. It's a terrific clip, and the resistance people have to your idea that white South African farmers should be brought into the country. We're just going to play that clip quickly, Avi. Here we go.
Can I ask you a quick question? Sure. So you're obviously advocating that we have more refugees. Do you feel the same about the white South African refugees? Should we be inviting them here as well?
No.
South African farmers, you know, the ones that are getting raped, robbed, murdered.
Oh, that's ridiculous.
Are you denying what's happening in South Africa?
Yes, I'm denying it.
Why not?
They've got their own country and they stole their land.
So do the
anyway.
Syrians. Really? The white South Africans now that are about 30 years old stole land.
No, but that's the history of the place. That's the history.
So they deserve what? A genocide? Can you sign our white South African? We want to bring in the refugees from South Africa. Are you happy?
I would prefer if the Rohingya came here first.
Why is that? Is that because they're brown? Will you sign a petition for the white South African farmers?
Drop dead, you're a fascist. Drop dead, you're a fascist. Drop dead, you're a fascist.
So there you go, Avi. Talk us through your concern for the white South Africans and what that sort of clip shows us about your activism and what you learned.
Yeah, so, look, my concern is probably like the majority of Australians. You hear about a pending genocide, a persecution of a minority based on their skin colour, and their voices aren't heard for one reason, and the reason is because they are white. And I went to that was a pro-refugee rally that I attended to simply put the question to the attendees, these humanitarians, would you be willing to sign a petition to bring those white South African farmers? And I got a no from everyone. In fact, it ended with one looking at the kippah. I wore a kippah on my head just so I can expose these hypocrites for what they are. I got called a Nazi. The last lady told me, she looked at my kippah, she said, "So you're Jewish?" And I said, "Yes, I'm a proud Jew." And she goes, "Oh, forget it."
Wow.
Avi, tell us where this... Obviously, you've got an unusual background, you know, with such a large family, Australian, but parents... So your mother, Yemini, means from Yemen.
Yep.
Yet, you know, which is the site of another ongoing humanitarian tragedy.
Yep.
Well, tell us how this activism began. Why are you not simply processing new applications for membership at a gym rather than out there on the streets getting called a fascist?
Well, I kind of fell into it. I had a popular gym. We had two gyms, and it was IDF training, and based on the name, people, when there was one of the Gaza operations, I couldn't just sit back and let, you know, the media tell the narrative. And I started speaking up, and a lot of people reacted to it and got involved in the conversation. Once that operation had ended, I kind of found a voice, and I started voicing my opinion on other subjects, and I got constructive criticism, maybe not to use my business platform. I opened my own Avi Yemini Facebook page, and I think my message kind of resonated with people, and I found my calling, I guess.
So you're with, I can see on your T-shirt there, the Australian Liberty Alliance. So tell us what your plans politically are, or hoping to go ahead. What are your goals? And tell us more about the white South African farmers, how you can what activist, you know, processes you intend to pursue.
Yes, I joined the Australian Liberty Alliance not too long ago. They came to me and they said they'll back all my campaigns. They love what I'm doing, and it's been great. In the last month, we've done a number of campaigns, whether it's against the Islamists marching on our streets in Melbourne or the white South African farmers, and we've got a lot planned. And, you know, I'm not looking to get into politics for the sake of politics. I'm looking to for a group a grassroots movement like Australian Liberty Alliance that are willing to back any campaign that's important for the people, the voice for the people, because I feel like in Australia, most Australians don't care about the topics that our politicians are talking about. And when we do talk about something important, like you saw on Friday when we came to deliver that petition to Julie Bishop, they hide, they run away. So a bit more of that is what I think we need here in Australia.
Well, tell us about, OK, so there was a demonstration in Melbourne, a pro-Islamic demonstration. Talk us through what occurred there and your thoughts on that.
So there was a demonstration organised by a number of organisations, co-hosted by the Islamic Council of Victoria. It was a pro-Hamas rally, a rally in support of Islamic terrorism. I've been to these before. They wave Hezbollah and Hamas flags. These are registered and recognised Islamic terrorist organisations. They wave those flags and they march in support of Islamic terrorists on our street. And I'm unwilling to stand by. And the Australian Liberty Alliance backed me. They said, Avi, we support you. And they stood by my side. And what I found interesting is out of the maybe 100 people that stood with me, 80% weren't even Jewish. And they realised that the day you allow Islamists to march on your streets in Melbourne, it is a dark day for Australia.
And they're marching in support of Hamas. Is this to do with the conflict that's currently going on with Gaza, with the so-called protests and kicking down the fence?
It was in support. It was against the so-called genocide in Gaza, which they're referring to the 17 killed by the Israeli Defence Forces, and I was a sharpshooter in that exact location. And I promise you now, if 17 were killed by the IDF, 16 and a half of them were Islamic terrorists.
Really? So talk us through your experiences on the Gaza border there as a sharpshooter.
So, look, I think Israeli soldiers are the most scrutinised, and it is hard conditions to work under as an Israeli soldier because you're watched from every angle around the world. Every bullet that comes out of your firearm has to be accounted for. If you cannot justify it, you are going to jail. And even sometimes in Israel, when you can justify it, soldiers go to jail for it. So this idea that there's a massacre on that border is so ridiculous. You had 200,000 marching there. If Israel wanted to massacre on that border, they could have blown 200,000 in moments. And if the tables were turned and Hamas had that power, what do you think would happen? And I think Australians need to open their eyes and realise you need to stop falling for the ABC narrative. Because Israel is defending her borders and we need to stay strong and stand side by side with Israel because they are fighting the same war we're fighting. They're just on the front line.
Avi, I'm going to ask, I'm going to give you a question without notice. Since you are a Yemeni, Yemen has been at various stages one of the world's poorest countries, yet we see this great wealth among other Arab Emirates on the Arabian Peninsula, but this one area of extreme poverty, it has become the centre of effectively a proxy war between Iran and Saudi Arabia. And at the moment, the West is arming Saudi to destroy Yemeni peasants, effectively, as a Jewish family with some roots in Yemen. Give us your 2 cents worth on that conflict.
Look, in that conflict, obviously I take the Saudi side, but I don't trust them either. And history has shown us, arming, different Muslim minorities or Arab minorities to fight, it never turns out well. That's how you found different Islamic terrorist organisations. I think we need to have less input. I can understand why Israel's finding allies in the Middle East. They live amongst a very hostile area, but I don't trust any of them. Iran right now is the biggest threat, yes, but tomorrow it could be the Saudis. So,
do you think there is any prospect for... One of the concerns I have to say Israel is that it winds up being caught, while there is unity on the side of both the Sunni and the Shia against Israel, the hostility between Sunni and Shia is so great, seems to be so universal, seems to have continued over 1,200 years of history. What have you got to say about the conflict between Sunni and Shia?
So you see it. Look, there's Sunni and Shia, and there's even more than just Sunni and Shia, but that's the two main sects. But they hate each other more than anything. And when people talk about Muslims are the first to be the targets of Islamic terror, it usually comes down to those sects. But one thing they're united on is killing the Jews and killing the infidels. And like they said, like the old saying goes, first they come for Saturday, then they come for Sunday. First they target the Jews, then they'll come for the Christians and the other minorities. The enemy of my enemy is not necessarily my friend, and certainly not in the Middle East. I'm a strong advocate that we need to stand for ourselves, and I think Israel is a light unto all nations, and we should take a lesson that, you know, standing up for yourself and defending yourself and in the face of so much hate can prevail and will prevail.
Avi, I want to go back to the Gaza border, and you were in the Israeli Defense Forces, sharpshooter, as you said. I wrote a newspaper column a couple of years ago in which I compared Hamas to ISIS, Islamic State. The editor of that newspaper said, you've got to be joking. So you talked about the ABC point of view. The editor said, you've got to be joking. There's no similarity between Hamas and ISIS. So talk me through the reality and your experiences in the IDF. What is going on in Gaza? What is Israel up against?
I think you're exactly right. Hamas, Hezbollah, Al-Qaeda, all these Islamic terror organisations, although they are slightly different flavours of the same thing, they are exactly the same thing. Their charters all call for the same things, for Sharia law, killing the infidels, stoning women that were raped. They are all exactly the same thing. If you go and watch their barbaric way of life and the way, you just look at the way they treat their own people. They are all exactly the same thing, and there is no hope for peace when you have organisations like the Islamic Council of Victoria in Melbourne running marches in support of these guys. We need to condemn all Islamic terror, no matter where they come from.
And what is like? You've looked through the binoculars. What is life like in Gaza?
Oh, as a Gazan, your biggest threat is not Israel. In fact, in 2005, when I was there, Israel withdrew. My family, some of my family lived in Gaza. They were kicked out of their homes and they lived in caravans after that. And what did Israel get in return? They got rockets from Hamas. And the people of Gaza got slaughtered. There was a civil war at the time where Hamas killed off their political opponents. So if you want to, you don't even need binoculars to see what's going on in Gaza. Just look, it's clear as day. You will see they stone women who were raped, and you're not talking about just crazy fanatics. You're talking about an entire community will stand around a woman and celebrate and cheer on the murder of a woman who was raped. That is Gaza. That is the reality, and those are the people that the Islamic Council are supporting. And
not only the Islamic Council, we've had discussion on this show that funds from Australian taxpayers find their way into Gaza through support for the Palestinian territories and through support for UNRWA, the United Nations Education in Gaza. Would you agree with that
100%. There is that. There's an Australian victim of terror. I spoke to her dad, Roth. She was... Yes. Arnold Roth, I spoke to him.
Yep.
Malky Roth, yep. She was murdered, and her family gets paid through Australian tax dollars. So we are essentially even paying for Islamic terror to murder our own Australians. It needs to stop. It absolutely needs to stop.
Avi, we've just been talking about the fact that Australia has no choice but to import youth into our country because white people have given up having children. That is certainly not the case in the Yemini family. Indeed, I understand that the person who had the largest number of living relatives of anyone on earth was an Orthodox Jewish matriarch from upstate New York who had, believe it, 2,000 living offspring. Of the 17 Yemini children, how many grandchildren are there now? Have you guys sort of continuing this tradition?
You're going to get me in trouble here. I think it's a little under 100. I'm going to get in trouble if my family sees this, but I don't know how many. There's a few of my siblings do have a number of kids, especially the ones that stayed true to the orthodox way of life.